20,000 eggs were thrown into the landfill. 3 months later, the unthinkable happened. The morning sun gently illuminated the peaks of northern Georgia, where undulating mountains met vast stretches of farmland. Small towns were scattered throughout the valleys, each home to tight-knit communities always ready to face whatever surprises nature might bring. However, no one in this tranquil region was prepared for the events that would unfold one spring afternoon at the local landfill. At first glance, the landfill was devoid of charm. It was a broad expanse enclosed by chain-link fences where old furniture, discarded tires, and mountains of household waste accumulated daily. Due to stricter health regulations, the site was managed by Darius, who oversaw the tractors that compacted the trash into neat layers. He ensured that safety standards were upheld and that hazardous materials were kept separate from regular refuse. Despite Darius's vigilant management, no one anticipated a miracle amidst the broken items and decaying leftovers. The story began when a shipment of eggs from a nearby poultry farm was declared spoiled. Rumors circulated about a power outage at the warehouse that had disrupted refrigeration, causing thousands of eggs to spoil. The farm was unable to sell them, and local cherries declined to accept them due to concerns over food safety. Consequently, the farmers had no option but to dispose of these potential hazards. Approximately 20,000 eggs, far too many to salvage, were loaded onto a truck headed for the landfill. Upon arrival, the crates were unceremoniously tipped into the garbage heap, left to break down like all the rest. For a while, the eggs sat there, barely noticeable among tattered plastic bags and discarded scraps. Yet, as spring advanced, the temperature started creeping upward and the Georgia sun began to blaze. Day by day, the sun's warmth grew more intense, while intermittent rains maintained an unusual level of humidity in the air. Soon, the local climate conditions conspired to create something akin to a massive makeshift incubator beneath layers of trash. Some of the eggs remained intact, insulated against abrupt temperature changes and sheltered from the worst of the landfill's chaos. Darius, the landfill manager, started noticing something peculiar during his rounds. There was a persistent chirping noise, faint at first, like a distant cluster of songbirds hidden behind a ridge. At first, he brushed it off as a trick of the wind or maybe just a few crows bickering over scraps. But the chirping grew louder and more distinct each day. One morning, curiosity overtook him. He hopped off his tractor and followed the sound around a row of towering garbage piles, picking his way carefully between broken crates. He was stunned to see tiny, downy chicks poking their heads out of cracked shells. As Darius approached, the chirping quieted and dozens of bright little eyes looked up at him with confusion and curiosity. He was left speechless by the sight of newborn chicks. How could so many have survived in such a harsh environment? Scanning the area, he realized there might be hundreds, if not thousands. The warm sun had effectively incubated the eggs, while the moisture in the refuse kept the shells from drying out. The flimsy cardboard crates that once held the eggs had provided just enough support to prevent crushing, though many eggs were still lost. Unsure of his next steps, Darius contacted the county's Environmental Services Department. News spread quickly, and soon residents of nearby Springville were hearing about the unusual phenomenon at the landfill: tiny chicks hatching in droves. Initially, it seemed too surreal to be true, but as rumors turned into reality, curious onlookers began gathering at the fence perimeter, eager to catch a glimpse of these miraculous little lives emerging from the most unlikely of places. The chicks, however, didn't stay confined to the landfill for long. Many began wandering in search of food as soon as they had the strength to walk. Little clusters of downy fluff scurried across the asphalt road leading out of the landfill, their small beaks pecking at whatever crumbs or insects they could find. The only reason they hadn't met an immediate disaster was that traffic was light on the back roads, and the drivers who did pass by slowed down or swerved to avoid running them over. Upon reaching the outskirts of Springville, the new arrivals created quite a buzz. Residents awoke to find peeping chicks wandering across their lawns and flower beds, while children squealed with delight at the sight of tiny feathered bundles nesting under porches and near garden sheds. Though charming, the townspeople recognized the potential crisis. These newborns needed shelter, food, and care to survive the cool evenings and lurking predators. A spontaneous community effort emerged, with families offering temporary homes for the chicks. Local teacher Miss Gonzalez opened her garage as a makeshift hatchery, where neighbors brought in rescued chicks. She enlisted her students to help care for them, turning the experience into an impromptu lesson in biology, responsibility, and compassion. "Nature finds a way," she often told the children, smiling as they fed the chicks with droppers of water and mashed feed. Meanwhile, local officials considered their options as the number of chicks continued to grow. Not all could be adopted, and some adventurous birds began sleeping under parked cars or inside discarded tires, while others returned to the landfill, where they could find a steady supply of food scraps. Concerned about health regulations and the possibility of disease, the county decided to coordinate with the state's agricultural department to figure out a humane, safe solution for the sudden chick boom. Meanwhile, the entire region buzzed with the unlikely story of how 20,000 discarded eggs had, against all odds, produced scores of baby chicks. Media outlets, both local and national, picked up on the tale. Reporters interviewed townsfolk on their front porches, capturing footage of wandering chicks scuttling through the suburban streets. Darius, once just a practical landfill manager, suddenly found himself in the spotlight. He shared wide-eyed interviews about the moment he first encountered the chirping chicks, admitting he never imagined such a miracle could happen in what he considered the least likely place for life. Local businesses in Springville rallied around the event, with hardware stores offering discounts on chicken wire and plywood for makeshift coops, and a feed shop donating starter feed to residents who took in the chicks. The grocery store even pledged a portion of its profits to support a sanctuary for the birds. The irony was not lost on the community. A batch of eggs deemed unfit for consumption had become a catalyst for celebration and unity. As the chicks grew, they adapted to their surroundings, with some choosing to roost in the landfill, forming what locals dubbed the landfill colony. This unexpected sight of little birds wandering among the trash not only surprised everyone, but also provided a small ecological benefit by consuming food scraps and reducing organic waste that attracted pests. Spring brought summer, and the surviving chicks that had been adopted into backyards began turning into pullets, recognizable by their adolescent squawks. In more than a few homes, families were delighted to discover that these young hens could eventually lay their own eggs, able to provide fresh eggs, ironically replacing the ones that had rotted. Even those who had never considered themselves chicken people found joy in the soft clucking sounds that now punctuated their daily routines. Parents posted photos of their children collecting eggs from the coops, marveling at the cycle of life that had improbably begun in a place most associated with decay. Yet not every chick thrived. Some succumbed to predators like foxes or hawks, which weren't uncommon in the Georgian countryside. Others fell ill before they could be vaccinated or cared for. Although the community was vigilant, nature still took its toll. Over time, the number of feral chickens roaming freely began to stabilize, as many integrated into human care, while others found hidden corners around a landfill or returned to the wild edges of the forest. As for the landfill, Darius took extra measures to keep the area sanitary. He installed signs reminding visitors and employees not to disturb the birds and to be cautious when driving heavy equipment near the feathered brood. He even roped off a section of the landfill where most of the chicks seemed to gather, effectively turning it into a roosting zone. Official plans were underway to transfer as many birds as possible to a specially designated sanctuary, though the process was slow and required vet checkups, transport logistics, and, of course, funding. Months went by, and the residents of Springville adapted to their new normal as summer faded into early autumn. By then, many of the young chickens were nearing adulthood, and extraordinary moments began to unfold. People started discovering clusters of freshly laid eggs in unexpected places, on back porches, in the hollow of old stumps, and even among the refuse where the chicks had hatched. The cycle of life had completed itself in a way no one could have imagined when those rotting eggs were first discarded. Thanks to the sun's warmth and an unexpected act of nature, thousands of new lives emerged from what had been deemed trash. Residents looked back with smiles, proud of how this improbable event had united their community. Neighbors supported one another, local children learned to care for living creatures, and even the landfill became a symbol of hope. Whenever visitors inquired about the chicken invasion, the townspeople would laugh and share the remarkable tale of how 20,000 discarded eggs transformed their town. Thus, amid the scenic mountains and quiet valleys of northern Georgia, what began as spoiled eggs became a testament to resilience, cooperation, and the extraordinary surprises nature can bring.